In Veda, it appears like the yoke under which some bullocks or some horses are kept for tilling purpose. Gradually, it is used for the yoking of senses, because our senses are like uncontrolled horses.
Mind is so monkey-like.
Yoga is not about pose. I mean, who cares if you put your foot behind your head?
What is the most certain thing in life? What is the most certain thing in life? And they said death.
It's not just some guy walking down the street, gets hit by a thunderbolt, wakes up and goes, wow, I just figured out how the whole universe works. And there was a blue God and a green God and all these different things, and they did all this stuff, and it's like, okay, you know? No, the revelation comes through a practice.
So we're seeing in the midst of all sorts of great material benefits, we are also seeing all sorts of mental problems. I mean, the number of people that are on antidepressants and things like that is quite remarkable, really, considering how comfortable we all are.
I will say the prayer first. Harihi Om Jnananandamayam Devam Nirmalaspatikakritim Adharam Sarvidhyanam Hayagrim Upasmahe Asmad Gurubhyo Namaha Devatabhyo Namaha Sarva Devatabhyo Namaha Harihi Om Abahu Purushakaram Shankachakrasidharinim Sahasrashirsham Shvetam Pranamami Patanjali. Yes.
It was the year 2008, and the world was just entering a great financial crisis. I had recently separated from my partner and my 1-year-old daughter, and both my world and the world at large seemed to be breaking apart. It was around that time that a friend of mine introduced me to yoga practice, and then things began to feel a little better. I started to meet very special people who in some way or another had dedicated a large part of their lives to yoga. Was this a religion, a fitness fad, a scientific discipline perhaps? This film is about those meetings along the way, in a search to glimpse into the origin and essence of yoga.
In the 1870s, Alexander Cunningham, who was Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India at the time, he discovered in what is now Pakistan, on the banks of the Indus Valley, the remains of 2 ancient cities.
Most of these sites are villages, but there's also the city of Harappa, which is about the same huge size as Mohenjo-daro, though there's not so much of it to be seen today. The origins of this civilization, like much else about it, are a mystery.
Now, that was a very sophisticated civilization in terms of town planning, drainage, crops, metallurgy, all sorts of things. Crucially, what they discovered a lot of these seals. On these seals are various characters looking like the records of a written language, and also various images. And the image that excited a lot of people at the time was an image that was called the Pashupata seal. But that Pashupata seal shows the figure of somebody a bit like Lord Shiva, that great god of India, except with horns and some instances surrounded by animals, and seated in what could be a yoga posture.
It is called the proto-Shiva, you know, as people who knows about Hinduism know that Shiva is considered as being the founder of yoga. And the deer has been a sacred animal for all shamanic culture all over the planet. Proto-Shiva is also called Lord Pashupati, and Pashupati means the Lord of the animals. For me, it makes a real connotation because I realized that this science existed way before the Hinduism was instaured.
Yoga's been there forever in its different forms. Some people believe that this was also prevalent in Egyptian civilization and in all the ancient civilizations. The Greeks meditated. Meditation is a part of yoga.
Officially, it is like 7,000 years old, maybe 8,000.
If that seal did represent somebody practicing a posture, that would be something that dated from, about 3,000 years ago.
I'd rather say this is knowledge from 2,000 years, and then if they don't, they're not impressed, the next time I'll say it's more than 4,000 years old, till I really get an impression as a teacher. But eventually, really, are we worried about the source or the importance of the knowledge in the present context?
And I've been very interested in shamanism. Most of the postures are trying to imitate the animals. And what the seers of the old days found out observing nature, because they were living completely in a complete natural environment, it was all jungle, it was all pristine, clean, is that the animals had natural grace. Meanwhile, humans, we were kind of very vulnerable. We didn't have any defense. And they were finding out that the animals were really in perfect harmony with their environments. So they tried to be like them.
As time goes, time changes, people's problems change. It's still very efficient. It's still very, necessary, this knowledge from yoga, which is a huge, huge thing. And it seems to have everything for everybody and from every culture.
I guess organized religion came with scriptures. People some intellectuals start to put in writing formulas what they were saying, those seers that were walking around in ecstasy, I will say ecstasy, better word for that, because they were in complete communion with the cosmic consciousness.
It appears in its germinal form. The term yoga appears for the first time in Vedas. Yada panchavatishtante jnanani manasa saha buddhischa na vichalati tamahuhu paramam gatim tam yoga miti manyante sthiram indriya dharanam apramattah tada bhavati yogo hi prabhavapyayo.
So we're talking about thousands of ancient books in Sanskrit language. They tell many amazing stories of kings and going back farther, and sages, rishis going back farther and going back farther and farther. And they ultimately tell the story of creation. And there's the story, a lot of people like to call it the myth. I just refer to it as the story. But in this story of creation, you have the first created being. He's known as Brahma. And he practices yoga.
It develops through Bhagavad Gita and then the Mahabharata portions, particularly in Moksha Dharma section of Mahabharata. And before going to jump into the technical mode, it was deeply influenced by Buddhism, in my opinion.
Generally, people don't think of Buddhism as a yoga. But that's largely because we think of yoga just as coming from a studio in New York or, Mexico City or somewhere.
Lord Buddha, he gives utmost importance for non-injury ahimsa. In yoga also they have given, particularly in Patanjala Yoga, you have heard of Panchavratas, particularly attached to the first member of Ashtanga Yoga by name Yama. Yama comprises ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya and aparigraha. Ahimsa means non-injury.
And then we think, well, Buddhism, but they sit the same. They use the same Sanskrit language for their mantras. The Tibetans weren't originally part of Buddhism. Somebody went there and spread Buddhism in Tibet. And if you ask them, they'll tell you immediately who he was. He was Yogi Sambhava. That's his name. He was a yogi from India. And he brought Buddhism to Tibet, which was a shaman culture. And then Tibetan Buddhism is actually a mix of shamanism, Buddhism, and yoga.
Without achieving this yama, he cannot go to niyama. So for yoga, this moral purification, that means mentally and physically he must be a pure person. He should not injure anybody.
So in my thinking, Jesus must have been a yogi. Buddha must have been a yogi of some type or another.
Yoga believes in a God, but here God does not play any very important role like other philosophical systems of India. Here God is like a teacher.
Because the Buddha famously, he tried all these radical things. He went off with Jain monks, and he did all these penances and fasting, and got as thin as a rake, and all his ribs were showing and everything. And he thought tried all that, didn't work. And then he went and sat under that tree in Bodh Gaya on that full moon in May, and all sorts of marvelous things happened. And then he realized, only mental. All mental. You don't have to do anything. You just this mental revelation, if you like. That is a very powerful motif from the Buddha's time onwards of how the mind is so important in all this, or crucial. I mean, it's the single most important factor in yogic type things is the way the mind works. Whether it really works as a practical path, whether you can really do things and be totally disengaged from what you are doing and not feel all the feelings that you would feel normally, and consequently attached and involved, is a tricky one. And there's certainly room for a lot of skepticism and all that.
That time Krishna explains to Arjuna, I know who I am. So I'm in the knowledge of all the things. You don't know who you are. So you are unaware of all these things. I'm indestructible. Just have taken form, but indestructible. That is in the 4th chapter of this Bhagavad Gita.
Here yoga admits God, but God has nothing to do with creation, that means creation of the world. Here, for up to certain point, God helps the sadhaka, that means the adept, only for certain, up to reach certain steps. He helps the yogi, he is not a yogi, the person who is going in the path of yoga, only up to samprajñāta samadhi. After that, the yogin he has to do on his own effort.
Like that Patanjali, whom we treat as the first guru of yoga, Patanjali Yoga Sutra, like that, no?
It's written text as opposed to oral texts that starts really in about the 2nd or 3rd centuries of the Common Era. By that time, there's a lot of mentions of yogic type things. In the epics, you have mention of discussions of people doing yogic type practices. Then, famously, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali that date probably from about the 3rd century. From that point onwards, practices of yoga are well documented. It should be emphasized also that when we look at Patanjali, it is primarily discussing practices of meditation. In the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, just in the 2nd part or in the 2nd chapter, there are only 2 mentions of asana or posture. One in the list of the 8 limbs, and then a little bit later there's a discussion of the 8 limbs, what they mean, and asana is just mentioned as sitting steadily and comfortably.
Vinyasa yoga invented by Patanjali, step by step, step by step. In other yogas, there is no steps. There is no limit of time. But here, 8 steps, limited time, and in this birth itself, you can get realization. In all other yogas, you must take several births. Anek jalma samsiddha tato yati param gati.
The first book I ever got on yoga by Vishnu Devananda, there was a little introduction then. The first picture, you turn the picture, the first picture was a guy passing a rope through his nose and out his mouth, like this, you know? And the next one was a guy swallowing like 10 feet of surgical gauze, you know? And I'm like, ooh, you know? Then there was actually a description, there wasn't a picture, but there was a description of how the yogi performs a self-enema, a colonics. Then began the Hatha Yoga. That is the real yoga system. Now, you try to sell that and see what happens. You go nowhere. So people will learn yoga and they'll learn to do some stretches and they'll learn to do a few asanas and things like this. And most of them will never even get to that stage. But if you came to India in the day of Krishna Namacharya, which was both the guru for Pratibha Joyce and Iyengar, then he'd have you clean up first. Because that is the beginning of yoga.
Here, yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, these are the 8 limbs of yoga. These are just like the 8 steps of a ladder. Without climbing the first step, you cannot reach the upper level. So, without having control on physical and mental aspects of a person, he cannot go to, that means without doing any achievement in yama, he cannot go to niyama. And without yama and niyama, he cannot go to asana. Though these are all gradual, that is ethical purification. First, ethical purification is highly essential for mental purification.
Patanjali was the great sage who, to me, was a great fitness specialist who sort of got all the knowledge which was available over the centuries. He was able to systematize it, put it down in writing. So probably that was one of the origins, like he was able to gather knowledge and put it down. And even today we see people writing great books of knowledge. Then really did they have all this knowledge or did they gather it? So eventually I think it's not needed to ask where it came from. And personally I feel because it's so deep, it touches every facet of human happiness.
Usually what people think of yoga is that whatever exercises you do, that is yoga. But that is also yoga, I agree. But yoga means that is union. Union with what?
This is Kirsten and Neelish. He's a big fan of the music of the Doors. And Kirsten, besides being my yoga teacher, has been practicing Ashtanga yoga for more than 20 years. She has been coming to Mysore often, for this is considered the regal birthplace of modern yoga. It is through her that I have met most of the people in this film, and with her help, we will have a privileged insight into the most traditional Sri Patanjala Yogashala practice. We will then venture further down the coast, where Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion, is practiced along with surfing in the world's first surfing ashram.
Well, what exactly yoga is again a very complex thing.
I think first of all, as it is the most effective form of fitness. Just looking at it from the outer, not going too deep, because eventually we do things for whatever benefits we get. That's how I see it. If there is a benefit, that's how I do it.
Yoga itself is egoism.
My fitness levels increased using very minimum expenditure of energy. And today the whole problem with life is energy. We are centered around energy, petroleum products or whatever. Without energy, human beings, human civilization can't go forward. Yoga has always been a very, very efficient way of trying to get energy, trying to get fitness.
It helps you to keep a body strong, healthy, and it can give you peace of mind. And we kind of tapped in this vital force, what the Chinese call the Qi, the Hindu call it prana, this life force energy. It is canalized through the bandhas, and it helps you to have unlimited energy.
Realization, don't think it is one kind of realization. That is two kinds of realization. One is self-realization, and the other one is God's realization.
Those yogis were using their body as a means to understand how the universe works, and how we are connected with this universe, making relations with the outward, which is inward. Like they say in the Bible that God has made man to his image. It's a kind of a metaphor, that within the human body we can embrace the whole universe.
Is the highest goal of a man, both his physically and mentally, and he can overcome mental problems and he can overcome physical problems by the practice of yoga.
The point is, it's not the activities, it's the experimentation to see what happens. And then if you notice a change of consciousness or change of feeling that you like or are interested to pursue, that is really at the root of the whole thing.
It's both. It's a science, it's a spiritual science, it's a way of life, it's an art form.
The purpose of man, the aim of man, realization. Realization, the world may not be understood by a common man, but not to get rebirth on the earth. That is the meaning.
Yoga means a sound body and a strong mind.
We look upon yoga as a science. It's not a religion. Ashram is not a place for practicing religion. It's a science. And ultimately, it's a science of consciousness.
The more radical the practices are, the more profound the change. Not that this isn't necessarily fraught with danger, because when you start on a radical path, particularly if it's a radical form of experimentation, there will be all sorts of changes to your personal life. And that can be quite disturbing. It can be quite liberating at the same time.
The science of consciousness in its forms of yoga, there's Ashtanga Yoga, Raj Yoga, Hatha Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. There's a lot of different yogas, okay? So mostly they've been ignored as having any value in our modern scientific world to understand where we come from, where the universe comes from. But the tide is changing.
It's not as though you just sit there and you become self-aware. I mean, it's as though you can somehow see inside yourself. I can't see how that works. But you can notice that from day to day or from week to week, you're feeling different or your consciousness is different. And if it's that observation process which is the part of I think that's the key. That is the root of yoga.
An experiment reveals what something is, okay? And it's an experiment in a test tube under a Bunsen burner with a bunch of tubes and all these things, and in the microscope, an experiment. And that reveals a truth. So what's the experiment to do to get this higher revelation? Here comes yoga once again. This is the experience. This is how the revelation comes.
Science. You feel science. But this yoga depends upon conquering the time and power. conquering power and time, scientific people also trying, and the religious people also is trying by penance, by controlling mind, intellect, and the conscience. Chitta, Manas, Buddhi. They depend upon these religious people. Science people are going to conquer by scientific way external materials, but internal materials, religious people. This is the difference.
Science, scientia, knowledge. Same with the Vedas. The root is vid, knowledge, to know. And that's what the essence of yoga is. It's to find out, to know about things. And of course, the only way you can know about things is to conduct experiments on yourself. I suppose a slight difference would be that the ordinary scientists would be conducting experiments on the outside world, if you like, whereas another kind of science would be conducting experiments on oneself.
Knowledge comes from the heart, not from the intellect. So it's interesting to read books and to read about, I did that, ancient history and great teachers and all that. But personally, I think more important is personal practice. Try to understand by your own self-inquiry. I think this is the most important.
In India, being a vegetarian is a quintessential part of being a yogi. Like we were talking about Kumbh Mela. There are yogis there by the tens of thousands of every description. Some of their lineages going back 10,000 years. I mean, and 99.99999% of them, in other words, for all practical purposes, they're all vegetarian.
It's not so much being a vegetarian. I don't like to have any rules about anything. I was vegetarian for years and years and years, and then I changed all that. I don't think it really matters.
To reduce this violence to the animal kingdom down to zero should be our first major goal. You see that in the commercializing of yoga, there's no pressure. There is not even a suggestion. If you stumble upon it yourself, then the teacher might say, yeah, that's good, yeah. But the way it is today, the teacher himself or herself, they may not even be vegetarian because they didn't even learn it.
Different eating habits, different beliefs. But now, today, people from all over the world are coming for this knowledge and they're getting something out of it. They're taking it back, they're improving on it, and they're helping their own fellow people, which I think is fantastic.
The word karma, it's even in the English dictionary now. It's a very popular word. There's bands named karma. It's very, very popular. But when you study karma, there are three types. There's karma, akarma, and vikarma. And karma means good work for a good life in your next life. Now we have reincarnation. This is not for the yogi, there's never just one life. We're here now in time and space, but we've been in time and space not hundreds, thousands, even millions of times before. In this universe and in even other universes. Reincarnation, because that thing, the self, we call it the self, in Sanskrit that's called Atma, it never ceased to exist. It's always been and it always will be. The question is, where will it be and in what state of consciousness will we be?
So it is not easy for each and every person to renounce everything and become people like me. Okay. They have got their own duties towards their families, married people, husband, wife, father, mother, sister, brother, children. So many attachments will be there. You can't neglect that also. Okay. You are supposed to take good care of that also, but do it as your duty, not with an attachment. Okay. Something happens to me, You can't take that. Something happens to you, I can't take that. That is your karma, you will have to undergo it. That is my karma, I am undergoing it. That is non-transferable karma. We believe in so many births, no? Until and unless we know what we are. We're supposed to come and go. And every birth, mind will be the same. In our previous birth, the same mind was with us. In future births also, it will be the same mind. So, the karma will also be the same, following each birth, accumulating. Whatever you do, that is your karma. Good, either good or bad. But both are karmas only. If you have done good thing, that will help you go towards more goodness.
But the fact is, we're not God. We're not the supreme in any way. We're not the supreme. We're not controlling even our own destiny. We don't even know how many hairs are on our head or how many have fallen out today while taking the shower. We don't know. We cannot control even digestion of our food. We are certainly not the supreme controller. But we are a spark of divinity.
We've been conditioned to believe whatever in a religion, or we always like to have someone who tell us, to make reference to somebody to tell us what to do, you know. Personally, I do not believe in gurus. I think that the downfall of India has been all this caste and Brahmin and caste system. There are some great masters in every religion, because religion is a kind of, I will say, part of a structure of a society, for it works well. But if we see it in history, religions, instead of unifying the people, they have separated them. So I really think that eventually the yoga is way beyond dogmas and belief system.
Maybe there is a difference in culture, and that's why the Westerners think differently. We think in terms of knowledge, to just acquire it. The Westerners generally with no offense meant, would say, what's the use of it? Which I also would probably think very often, is there any use to do it? Because people don't have time, and they have a problem, it has to be solved. I wouldn't say, go back to the traditional, go and find your guru. They will come, the guru will come, the teacher will come. It's not like magic, it's because your search continues, and you will discard who is not good for you, and automatically you will find your own master. It's not that the master finds you, it's not so mysterious. It's like, because you search, you find your master. The master never finds you.
For me, a teacher is a man that helps you to find out by yourself. He's not a guru that imposes you a belief.
The problem is that because yoga has become these days such a giant international business, I see on the Facebook and LinkedIn and all these, jobs for, like directors of a yoga center and this sort of thing, only the proper jobs nowadays, millions of dollars turning over. You get absurd situations where teachers on one particular school will tell you you're not allowed to go and try another teacher, or go to another teacher, or try other forms of yoga. Well, for me, that's killing off the thing stone dead. The whole point is to try as many things as possible and find out what works. By being restricted to one school of yoga or one system of exercises is absolutely absurd.
I think yoga will lend itself to the situation. Traditionally, what do I have to do? I have to go to the guru, the master, and just sit at his feet. Traditionally, they used to beg food for the master and then offer the food. Yes, it's all good, because you have to have blind faith. Blind faith is needed to get your commitment. But do we need blind faith today? We have moved away from the jungles. There is so much of information around. And do we have the time for that? I feel no. And I feel that at each point of time, what is needed has to be done. One of the things I've always said is I will speak on yoga, but I will not demonstrate the asanas, because then a thought could come, oh, I've seen this in the circus. I've always said just go into any store, pick up any literature you see, and that will have something for you, which is very true. And yoga is bigger than anything. Nobody can sell it or buy it, and it will lend itself to it. If somebody can come up with an instant yoga, why not? Why not? If it's taken me 20 years to find the truth and somebody else finds it in 5 minutes, why not?
Or yoga means union with spiritualism, nature, that should become part and parcel of your life.
Somebody once said something like, "Can you see God?" I said, "You mean you can't?" So it's just a matter of what's your perception. It's not that I look at the sky and the sun and the ocean and I see Lord Krishna with his flute dancing across the water. No, no. But by evolution of consciousness, I understand this emanation of this universe and all beings in it come from that supreme spiritual being. So in that sense, yeah, I'm seeing God. Someone else doesn't have the training, doesn't have the experience, no purification of consciousness, and everything is very, very jaded. We think the world is here for us to enjoy. Well, then what are our grandchildren going to enjoy? There ain't going to be nothing left unless we slow down the spirit of enjoyment. So if the spirit of enjoyment is what the world is for, then why are we running out of candy? In other words, philosophically, that must not be the spirit of the world. But if the spirit of the vision of the world is we're in an organic spiritual whole and we're all interdependent and we're not here to enjoy, we're here for enlightenment, then this just exploitation of the elements of the world and nature slows down, ultimately almost stops. Then there's plenty for everybody forever.
And I think that knowledge, is definitely Brahma Vidya. It's God is one, God is for everybody.
You should not expect anything from anybody. That is yoga. That should be taught to the public. Dedicate. See, there is wants, there is God. God is not want. You want wants or God. Two things cannot be there. World is there, God is there. You want world or God. Then that is realization.
The more you try to know about Shiva, more secretive he becomes. Wonderful God. This is real yoga. Of course, this practice is what you do with your body, this one. That is also good for your physical existence. If you combine such good qualities like this, meditation, thinking of God along with yoga, that makes beautiful combination. That is real yoga. Yoga means union. Union with what? This yoga is for our physical body. But what about our soul? This soul, God, these are inseparable. Inseparable. Because before this creation, we are also within Him only, all souls.
Listening to Swamiji, it's hard not to be touched by yoga and its ancient wisdom. In this world of ever-quickening change, it has helped me find peace within myself. Doing stretching exercises obviously does not change things in the larger picture, but I have learned that working on myself, my consciousness, and my connection to everything around me, it's a good place to start.
There is no doubt that there was a lot of influence or cross-fertilization, if you like, from gymnastics into yogic practice. The distinctive thing that happened in Mysore really was that for the first time, instead of being transmitted from guru to disciple or father to son, as traditionally would have happened in schools of yoga, whereas there have been a few students maximum and also transmitted secretly, you know, early in the morning they do yoga practice together. It's not something for public consumption. But the big change in Mysore was public classes, and also public classes where women were invited. This was a novelty. And in that process, a lot of the more radical practices were left out. If we look in the yoga texts, we can see a lot more radical practices, Vajroli Mudra and so on, all these very, very extreme things that mentioned in the text, but none of that happens in modern yoga classes. It is very much more for public consumption and not that radical. Yeah, you do exercise, you do pranayama, but you're not talking about going to a yoga class and getting buried alive for the weekend. nothing as serious as that.
There is the commercial side of yoga. And even that does help people. They feel better, you know, they're healthier.
If you have become a yogi, that yoga must be taught to another person, 50%. If I get samadhi, I can go to heaven. But you are not released from the loan. A yogi, only one, has not given children to the society, but he must give his knowledge to his disciple.
When we started, I knew Danny Paradise when I met him in Hawaii. He was the only guy going around. Maybe there were also David Swinson came. Some very few guys. I mean, we introduced this form to so many places, and people were looking at us like we were weird freaks. And now it's become mainstream. I mean, and you know how it became mainstream? Because Danny happened to teach to Sting. He knew Dominic Miller, the lead guitar of Sting, and he started teaching Sting, and people like to do what famous people do. Because I'm not so much in the cult of personality and fame, because I'm a son of a very famous man who was a great artist. He was a great performer, and I know that you pay a heavy price for fame and name. We say in Sanskrit, Neti Neti Namarupa. You are not this name, you are not this form. We are just incarnated spirits.
Food will be converted into blood, blood will be converted to your semen. Semen, that is called Virya. That is the capital, your capital, your capital, your capital, I tell you. Nothing is in this world your capital. So your brothers have given, your sisters have given, your mother has given, your father has given, somebody has given 10 rupees, $10. You have developed it billions. That is not your property. So your property is only the semen. By that you can become a Raj Yogi or a Hatha Yogi.
Because we all going to age eventually, no matter how good you look, you know, everything goes sometime, you know. So that's a reality of human condition. Everything must pass. So on that level also, the yoga helps a lot to understand that process.
Actually, I lost my husband in 2005. For 2 years I suffered a lot. But then I wanted to think for myself, if I suffer mentally like this, I will not regain my husband. And I have to do something, because I don't like to plunge, I wanted to float, I wanted to swim. And this is the reality of each and every individual. Somehow I try to overcome my agony through meditation.
So, but the practice of yoga isn't just a one-off, like, oh, I feel great today, I feel really spiritual, I feel like loving mankind, I feel like I'm part of this universe, and then it's all forgotten in the next moment. It doesn't work that way. It's a growing experience.
I want to increase my mental energy. This is through meditation. Every day, about half an hour, I will do pranayama. And while doing this pranayama, I utter the name of God and I recite the name of God, Om Namah Shivaya. Because in our Hinduism, Shiva is a god of some achievements. See, Patanjali, here also he uses the term Ishvara, Tad Japaha Tadartha Bhavana. And Ishvara means it also applies to Vishnu, it also applies to Jesus Christ, it also applies to Allah. Whatever the God you believe, you can use the term Ishvara.
So there is no difference between Shiva and Krishna. All are formless. Every God is everywhere. Okay. Wonderful experience. I like it.
I have never come across an article on samadhi in Yoga Journal. And samadhi is the Sanskrit word for the ultimate state of pure consciousness, which is to be achieved through yoga. I think the spirituality of surfing and the spirituality of sports is what people bring to the sport, what they put into it, and makes it so. But again, I'm saying I think. It's just my opinion based on my life experiences. But yoga isn't like that. If properly taught and properly practiced, you don't bring the spirituality to yoga. Yoga awakens your spirituality.
These are visible forms. Actually, God is formless. Okay. But in the beginning, it is not possible for us to concentrate upon something which we don't know, formless. You can't think, imagine a blank thing, no? Your mind will go vary, okay? So there should be something to be targeted upon, aimed at. Until and unless the thought becomes powerful, is not going to answer your question. Only surface level thinking will not help you. Deep involvement in what you do. If you believe also, God is there. If you don't believe also, God is there. So it is better to believe, okay? That makes sense, okay?
There's no doubt that in the world these days there is profound malaise about everything. You go anywhere, people, they don't know what's wrong, but they know it's not right. You know, we live in a situation of unprecedented wealth. I mean, it's unbelievable. And we've sacrificed so much freedom for our security that we've lost that sense of wonder that comes with being free. It's only when you're really free, you have a sense of wonder about things. As children do when they're very young, and they have a sense of wonder because they're very free. But as we become more and more secure, we lose our sense of freedom, we lose our sense of wonder. And because we've lost our sense of wonder, everything becomes slightly boring and dissatisfying. We've got everything, we don't know why we're not thinking this is marvelous, everything. And I think that probably if there is any future development in yoga, it will be far more on the mental level of working on techniques and practices really to bring us to a greater state of freedom in the mind. And that will probably only arise when there is a crack in our sense of security. And as long as we can cling to a general sense of security, we don't want to change. But if we're forced to change, that, I think, will probably cause an enormous shift in consciousness.
If there is something called disadvantage about yoga, when I'm as an engineer, I would only think is that you have to do it. Like, whatever the knowledge, you have to practice it, you have to experience it. There are other engineering things, like you can just sit on a chair and sort of enjoy it, switch on the TV, enjoy the program. Somebody else dances and does everything. It goes bad, you get an engineer to come fix it. It's like fixing your car. If it goes out of order, you just take it to the garage and it's fixed. But if you go out of order, there's nobody to fix you. You have to fix yourself. And yoga is the best fixer. And you can do it yourself. It empowers you. Today people are talking about control. We are controlled. We like it or not, we are controlled by the media, we are controlled by so many exterior things. But here is something that gives you empowerment. You can do it yourself, and you can bring happiness to yourself. And most importantly, I think you can give that happiness to people. Yoga has empowered me, made me more generous.
Today we have access to all this information in the palm of our hand, but it's not possible to know it all just like that. Yoga is a huge parcel to just take a glance at, and I'm not sure I will ever reach enlightenment, but for me it has been easy to be a part of it thanks to those people who have shared their knowledge and who have given me their friendship and love so freely. Many thanks to them and to all of you for coming along in this journey.